We are here in New York at the office of the American Sephardi Federation. When I planned today's event, and you'll hear more about where we are and why we're here and what we're going to do, I didn't realize that by bringing the posters behind me from the March for the Rally for Israel, the March for Israel, just 2 weeks ago, I didn't realize that at the table, though he's hiding, he's off camera right next to Ruben, but we have one of the main organizers of the march with us here. So we're giving a silent round of applause to Alex Graffel for bringing 290,000 people in person and another 250,000 online. So I hope you appreciate seeing the posters. You probably weren't able to actually touch and hold them while you were at Mission Control on that special, very special Tuesday. I'm not going to say much more other than I'm going to mark our last meeting as a way to bridge to this meeting. When we met in Los Angeles in person with a collection of people on Zoom, as we are today around the country, we focused on media. We had a meeting on media and peoplehood. And in summing up that, that was an extraordinary meeting, a different context. Last summer, Rob Eshman, who's a former editor of the Jewish Journal and a sort of media guru, he summed it up in a number of ways, including focusing on the incredible potential for media. But one of the key challenges is that media, new and old media, is unidirectional. And he said, building peoplehood and building community, we need to try to find ways for multi-directional. So this is not a media enterprise, this is a meeting. It's a meeting in person here in New York and across North America, but we are going to make it multi-directional. In Rob's citing Rob and his guidance, this is an opportunity for us for the next hour and a half to meet and to delve into some of the most important and vital issues that have defined this agenda around the war in the last few weeks. I want to turn it over to my colleague Amanda Beckerman. She's joining us from Baltimore. Amanda's vice president of Chasbro, which is the family office of Charles Bronfman, and she's my colleague here at Enter, the Jewish Peoplehood Alliance. I'm going to turn it over to her to start the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Hi, everyone. I just wanted to open by commenting on October 7th. As we know, Israel is forever changed, as are the lives of many of our family members, our friends, and our colleagues who live there. They have been affected so deeply, and therefore we are affected just as deeply. They are rebuilding, and we will be there every step of the way because we have a responsibility to do so, because we are one Jewish people. All of us, the Jewish people, every single community, every organization, no matter where you are or what your work is day to day, all of us have a role to play. And with that, on behalf of Enter, the Jewish Peoplehood Alliance, I'm pleased to welcome you. A special word of thanks to Ruben Shimonov and the American Sephardi Federation for hosting this program and for offering the tour of the cultural treasures afterwards for those that are in person, including Ruben's own calligraphy works, which were commissioned by the U.S. Department of State. Very impressive. Our Peoplehood Coalition aims to unite North American Jewry around the idea and practice of peoplehood. We seek to broaden its appeal and deepen its day-to-day relevance for member communities and organizations. Doron Krakow, head of JCC Association of North America, and Dr. Laura Shaw-Frank, who you will hear from in a moment, are our co-chairs, and we are grateful for their leadership, as well as the support of the Rodin Family Foundation and Jeffrey Solomon, who continue to support this work. As those who have joined before know, we use the Masterclass series to learn new insights, explore new data, and new pedagogies from leaders in our field. And we want to ensure that these gatherings serve as platforms for building professional connections and cross-communal collaboration. For anyone that's not yet on our mailing list, please let us know afterwards offline. You can also check out our website, peoplehoodcoalition.org, for videos and resources. And we are deferring until later this winter a planned masterclass on cultural repositories. So stay tuned for that. And let me now turn it over to Dr. Laura Shaw-Frank, a longtime educator, a widely respected thought leader and currently National Director for Contemporary Jewish Life at the American Jewish Committee. Laura hosted the first meeting of the Peoplehood Coalition in her office last year, for which we are grateful. And I'm going to hand it over to you, Laura.
Thank you, Amanda. Welcome, everybody, online and in person. We're sorry for those of you who are online that you're missing this delicious food, but next time, hopefully, we'll all be able to be in person together. So welcome, everyone. I remember when I was at the last one of these master classes, afterwards, I said to Scott, that was just so incredibly useful. It was just such a profoundly useful gathering where I felt like I actually learned an enormous amount. And for someone who works for, as my son calls it, Big Jew, which I think it's so hilarious. We don't often feel like, sometimes you can feel like, maybe there isn't anything else to know. Maybe there's not more growth to have. And this is actually what is so powerful about these master classes is that we're bringing together people from different organizations in a learning environment so that we can really hear from each other and we can really gain from the interactions that we have. So our theme today is peoplehood in wartime. And I just want to say, Scott and I have spoken a lot over the past couple of months about this topic. We had a very different topic initially that we will come back to. And maybe we'll come back to here, Ruben, because our other topic has much to do with this building. But it struck us that this moment is very much a peoplehood moment in the sense that we've seen an outpouring of support and unity throughout the Jewish world that I don't remember seeing in my lifetime. Maybe we saw it in the Soviet Jewry era, Soviet Jewry movement. But even then, it wasn't the same feeling of unity between Israel and the United States, the same unity of Jews throughout the world. And we wanted to explore what that looks like. What is this moment of peoplehood? I'll give you just a little vignette from my own experience. I work with independent schools in New York City, like these shishi private schools in New York City. And one of the private schools I work with is the Fieldston School, which is in Riverdale. And I work very closely with them. I advise their Jewish Parent Affinity Group. And the Jewish Parent Affinity Group before October 7th had, I think, 56 people in it. It now has 294 people in it. They are having a Shabbat dinner this week at Fieldston, that has 600 people attending.
In the building?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's very tricky. It's a whole problem, but whatever. We won't get into the Fieldston building and all the issues. It's a problem. I mean, a wonderful problem, but a problem. And this is something that is being mirrored everywhere throughout the Jewish world. There is a feeling of showing up in ways that I don't remember seeing, maybe ever. And we thought it would be important to explore what that showing up looks like. First of all, because we need, as Jewish communal professionals, we need to understand it. People who think about peoplehood, who care about peoplehood, we need to understand it, try to get to what's going on in this moment? What does the showing up look like? And what is the meaning of this showing up? And lastly, and we'll do this at the end, I want us to think about what the implications of this showing up are for the future of the Jewish people, for the Peoplehood Project, and for the future of Jewish people around the world, in America and in Israel. Of course, we have to acknowledge, as Amanda did, and center the fact that this moment of peoplehood came as a result of enormous, unfathomable horror and tragedy that we are still unpacking, and we will be unpacking for decades to come. And we're, of course, cognizant of the fact that there are still over 200 hostages in captivity. I think over 200, maybe it's right under 200 at this point. That there are many of our young soldiers in harm's way, although now in a brief pause. And of course, the destroyed communities of the Gaza envelope, which are very much in our hearts. And of course, we're thinking as well about the innocent in Gaza who have struggled and suffered enormously in this moment too. So with that, of course, that keeping that suffering and that grief and that horror very central to our minds. let's turn to what we're seeing in terms of peoplehood in this moment. So we have 3 guests to present to us today, and we're going to hear from them about showing up in terms of finances, showing up in terms of advocacy, and showing up in terms of showing up, just like physically showing up in places. And we have 3 incredible presenters who are going to talk to us. Evan Hochberg, my friend, who I've known for many, many years through lots of Jewish communal work together, who's the Associate Vice President and Deputy Director for Israel and Overseas at Jewish Federation of North America, who's going to speak to us about showing up financially. Tova Dorfman, who's joining us from Israel, who's the president of the World Zionist Organization and the longtime head in Israel of the Steinhardt Family Foundation. Very experienced philanthropic peoplehood professionals in Israel, who's going to talk to us about showing up advocacy-wise with respect to hostage families. And lastly, Todd Rockoff, who's president and CEO of the Jewish Community Center of Tucson and one of the most respected leaders in the JCC movement in North America, is going to talk about showing up physically, showing up. So in the interest of time, I think we're going to dispense with participant introductions and ask everyone to just introduce yourselves as you speak. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Evan, to start us off. Jewish federations, I'll just note, have collectively raised over $700 million since October 7th. Let's just repeat that number, $700 million. By the way, I have no doubt that that money won't even be enough for what we need it for, but unbelievable, the outpouring of giving, and mobilized Jewish communities in unprecedented ways, including the DC rally for Israel, which brought almost 300,000 Jews together. So Evan, the floor is yours.
Great. Well, it's great to see all of you. Thank you so much, Laura, my friend, and really appreciate Scott and Amanda inviting me. I've really benefited from hearing some of you who've presented in a previous session. So I'm glad to have a turn as well. So Laura, I really, a lot of what you said really resonated. I have been thinking a lot lately about one of the main themes of the Passover Seder, which is that, and it's repeated over and over again, which is that every generation of Jews faces an existential moment. And I really have felt over the last 6 weeks or however long it's been, that this is our generation's moment. Our generations of Jews in Israel, America, and around the world are really being challenged in ways that we never thought that we would have to be. And amongst all of that sadness, I have really felt comfort in seeing this as a moment of Jewish peoplehood, as Laura mentioned, a time in which, with all of our wonderful diversity, we feel a tremendous connection to each other and a common purpose. I wanted to talk to you today about Jewish Federation's work. Jewish Federations are uniquely positioned for this moment. We are on the ground every day in 146 communities across the United States and Canada. We work regularly with local and national government and with the Israeli government. Federations in just a normal year allocate over $200 million from our annual campaigns to Israel and world Jewry. Our core funding, which part of unrestricted funding that we give to our historic partners at the Jewish Agency for Israel, JDC, and World Ort, make sure that they can respond to emergencies anywhere in the world because they are there on the ground before the emergency happens. So immediately after October 7th, our leadership announced 2 campaigns. The first is to mobilize our communities to support and advocate for Israel. I'm going to only touch upon that because, to be honest, that's not my work area, but I've been able to see it in action from my colleagues. And then the second, which I've been much more involved in, is raising funds to meet the needs of people, family, and communities that have been impacted. Laura said how much we've raised. I think you actually have jumped the gun a little bit. So far, we've raised a little over $650 million, although I'm sure it's going to be at over $700 million soon. But really, immediately in that first week, federations announced an unprecedented goal of $500 million, and federations passed that number within weeks, which was really unbelievable. So I'm just going to start, as this is being pulled up, with a couple of slides, just giving you highlights of our advocacy and community mobilization work that I'm just going to run through very quickly. But just, and I'm happy to answer any questions about them later on. So next slide. So we've done a bunch of things at the Jewish Federations of North America. One is that we created immediately a community mobilization center, which provides rapid response and other resources to federations on the ground and other professionals in order to be able to advocate and communicate with government officials and with the wider public. We've done training sessions. We're actually about to have another one tomorrow on K through 12 education. And we've had another one on how to speak to media. So we really, in a way, we created a new infrastructure to be able to do rapid response. And the next slide. At the same time, we really, my colleagues been working tremendously hard for advocacy in Washington. We've already had 2 fly-in days, lobbying days in Washington. We're going to have a big one of lobbying day in days in January. At the same time, we've issued actions alerts, which helps people contact their elected officials. So far, there's been over 1 million contacts. We had a really powerful letter from 2,500 Holocaust survivors and their descendants to President Biden to thank him for his support for Israel. And we've also worked with families of hostages to facilitate their meetings in Washington and elsewhere. Next slide. I hope that many of you are familiar with our Blue Ribbons for Israel campaign. This is an effort to, in partnership with every federation and with hundreds of other organizations, to really have a present and visible display of support for survivors and their for hostages and their family members and those who survived the terrorist attacks. This has gotten tremendous distribution, including really amazing pictures from members of Congress and other people who are wearing their blue ribbons. And there's a website, blueribbonsforisrael.org, if you want to have more information or be able to partner in the effort. Next slide. At the same time, on a local level, really from the first week after October 7th, individual Jewish federations have organized over 160 solidarity gatherings. I hope many of you have participated in them. In my own community in northern New Jersey, there was the week after October 7th, there was really an unprecedented solidarity gathering at our local JCC, where the overflow room was overflowed, and people ended up being on the outside the building singing songs. It was just really an unprecedented gathering in our community, and that's been happening around North America. Next slide. And then, of course, the March for Israel, which Jewish Federations of North America led together with the Conference of Presidents. We could have a whole session on the impact of the march and what it says about Jewish peoplehood. I would say that the picture on the left, which is really something that you don't see very often, which is congressional leaders, Democrats and Republicans linked in arms, in front of a sign that's expressing support for Israel, freeing hostages, and against anti-Semitism. That really showed the bipartisan nature of support for Israel and its people in this moment. Next slide. Okay, so that was the advocacy work. I'm happy to talk about it more in the question and answer and discussion period. But I wanted to shift to our the Federation's work on raising funds and then allocating funds. So if you can go to the next slide. So here you see that this is somewhat dated information. It's from pre-Thanksgiving, but it's the latest dollars that we've announced. So far, federations have raised over $657 million. About $188 million of that has already been allocated and deployed on the ground in Israel. Just wanted to give you a little bit of perspective on that, because you're throwing around a few $1 million and it's difficult to understand what it means. And to put this in perspective, as I mentioned before, federations raise on a typical year about $200 million to support humanitarian causes in Israel and global Jewry. So in 5 or 6 weeks, there's been an additional $657 million as federations are still working on their essential annual campaigns. And also to put it in perspective, it's difficult to even remember this, but for the previous 18 months, federations and Jewish communities have been really focused on supporting relief for the crisis in Ukraine. And over those 18 months, federations raised a little over $90 million for the Ukraine crisis, which was a really tremendous amount, but is just a small, is really only $90 million compared to $650 million that has been raised in this short period of time. I also wanted to mention that the majority, I'm not going to go into too much of these bar graphs, but what you see is that the majority of allocations are being made through Jewish Federation's collective allocations process, which is run by an allocations committee that's led by Jeff Schoenfeld, who is our Israel and Overseas chair, and he was a former board chair of UJ Federation of New York, together with Steve Hoffman, who's the CEO of the Mandel Foundation, and before that, a longtime CEO of the Cleveland Federation. We've also, a real theme throughout everything I'm talking about is partnership between organizations, and Hillel International, the Reform Movement, and JCC Association have partnered with us on the campaign and in the allocations process, which I think has been innovative and really wonderful. So next slide. So a little bit about how we work. Federations are, and the central allocations process is really a hub. We are constantly bringing in information and learning. We're broadening our knowledge with about potential partners and grantees. We're gathering new information, and we're thinking about the short term, the medium term, and the long term, even as the situation is really evolving very rapidly. We start off by working with our historic partners, which I mentioned earlier, the Jewish Agency for Israel, JDC, and World Ort, and they are crucial sources of information. And we saw this in Ukraine, and we've seen it now in Israel since October 7th, that, as I mentioned earlier, the core funding, the unrestricted funding that federations are providing to our partners every year enables them to respond immediately, and they do so with tremendous expertise and experience. At the same time, for a crisis this big, our core partners don't cover everything. And we have been funding as a collective well over 100 NGOs. As of a few weeks ago, it was 115 non-governmental organizations in Israel. There's a constant amount of work of reviewing many applications. We have an open call for proposals from federations to NGOs on the ground. We are constantly reviewing it. We've done it actually also with in partnership with the Schusterman Foundation, which has loaned us some amazing staff. We funded innovative organizations that have developed or have completely changed their focus to respond to this crisis. A great example is an organization that is called Brothers and Sisters. I'm blanking
For
on
Israel.
but for Israel, right?
Changed the name, now it's for Israel. Yeah.
Right. So it used to be Brothers and Sisters in Arms. They were Brothers in Arms. They were the major protest organization working on the democracy movement in Israel before October 7th. Once October 7th hit, they immediately transitioned to becoming a major hub of so many volunteer grassroots activity to help Israelis, and federations have been relying on them to providing sizable grants to them to help in their work. And that's really just one example. We're also in constant touch with governments, both on the local and the national level, Israel's business community, local authorities, civil society, and others. And we're just continuing to learn and understanding what is developing and thinking through what the broader strategies are going to be. At the same time, we, one more second before you switch, if you can go back one slide. Thanks. So at the same time, there are individual federations, particularly the larger federations, have staff on the ground in Israel. Many of them have tremendous expertise in some of the outlying areas where there are longstanding partnerships between federations and communities in Israel, including in the area near Gaza. And these professionals have been really helpful in helping us understand the needs on the ground and being able to monitor this, the spending on the ground, particularly in the areas near Gaza. There's also a tremendous vetting process that federations always have for funds that go to organizations in Israel. We make sure that we have a broad view, so we're able to see that the amounts that are being requested are reasonable and justified, that they reflect needs that are not already covered by either Jewish Federation's annual funding or by other organizations. And we're also just constantly responding to queries from federations and other donors and partners on the ground. There's a lot there, I know, but I'm happy to answer questions.
There's a lot. Evan, if I could ask you, maybe on the next slide, if you just pick one or two of the key pieces, maybe the timeline.
Sure.
And I want to give some other people a chance to
definitely
chime in. We've got some of the federations actually that you talked about are on the call.
Amazing. So I will talk very briefly about the remaining slides. So we have from the beginning broken down the needs in Israel into different categories. We now work under 4 categories that you see here. I'll just mention very briefly that in Lifeline services, these are all of the emergency needs that you think about: food, hospitals, housing. A particular focus has been on local, on the regional councils and municipalities that were impacted, and then also a focus of federations, because it's part of our everyday work, is helping special communities with special needs, whether that's the elderly, Holocaust survivors, Ethiopian Israelis, Russian-speaking Israelis, and Bedouin and other Arab Israelis who have been impacted. Mental health and trauma relief is going to continue to be a really tremendous focus because of what percentage of Israelis are traumatized. I'll get to the next 2 in a second when I get to the timeline. So if you go to the next slide. So you see that we're thinking of it in terms of a timeline. So certain needs are going to be much more prominent in the beginning. So the Lifeline services are really in the next, like in the first few months of a crisis. Mental health and trauma relief has a much longer trajectory, and then certain issues, economic relief and rescue and community resilience and rebuilding, may start later, and we're really focusing on thinking through strategies of them now, but they're going to become much more important later on as the shift goes to rebuilding and making sure that small businesses are able to continue to exist. So next slide, the next two slides, which I'll just, I won't go through, but I'll just frame, which is that we're also taking a real look at what a methodology would be for assessing our allocations. We've defined different metrics, different outcomes for each category of those 4 categories that I talked about before, and then breaking them down into sub-themes. This is really, we're beginning in this work, and there's a real balance between making sure that we're getting metrics, but also not overburdening grantee organizations who are doing the work on the ground. So that's a real focus. You go to the next slide, which is a continuation of this. And then the next slide is thank you. But as we're saying thank you, I just wanted to end by saying a couple of what's next, just to raise them. There's a constant needs assessment about the situation on the ground, which is developing. The government is starting to really shift into place in their role. They've created this organization called Manhala Tekuma, and we're in close contact with them. We're also tracking key areas like how youth are now at risk, youth that are evacuated. We're looking at the impact on the most vulnerable in Israeli society, the safety net, and we're also we'll start to really look at how to help reservists and other soldiers once they are coming back from the front. So that's really a very short, although I exhausted my time, but really like a compact look at our process for assessing need and making sure that the funds that are being raised by federations are being used in a way that is most helpful for Israelis in need on the ground.
Amazing.
That was great. Can we do maybe just a lightning round?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so yes, let's do a lightning round of comments. Anyone who has,
I'll start with one.
yeah, go ahead, Scott.
I'll chime in with a couple of quick comments, and then maybe we'll give an opportunity for, there are some other federations represented here from Atlanta, Youngstown, Ohio, from Naples, Florida. I may be missing others. If people just want to comment, it was such a thorough presentation. We'll ask you also, Evan, if we can share it with participants today.
Of course.
I think people would love to see it. 2 quick comments. One, I've read the work of Eric Fleisch, who's now at Penn State. When he started at Brandeis, giving to Israel had been sort of stagnant for a while, but also not just stagnant, had been fragmenting away from centralized giving. He cited totals looking at IRS data of, I think, about $2 billion annually. The amount that you presented just from the federation system, nearing 700 million, is extraordinary surge in recent years. So I just want to add that sort of point of context: extraordinary surge and extraordinary return or reinvigoration of what many of us in this room at the table here, we looked at John Ruskay as a mentor. He's one of the founders of Enter, our organization. He speaks about the federation as the ultimate peoplehood organization based on a principle of Arvut Hadadit, of gathering support and allocating it. In many respects, the federation moment is now, and you've shown us how the data fits with that. I also want to make a quick comment. I don't know if Eric or others from federations want to comment themselves, but where I live in Washington, D.C., I told Evan before when we were talking about today, Gil Prus, who's the director of the DC Federation, he said out of 5,000 donations in the first, I think it was 5 or 6 weeks, fully 1/2 of all the donors were first-time givers to the Federation. So, and Laura and I, we also spoke about this. It speaks to her comments at the beginning, whether it's Federation giving or these other areas of mobilization that we're talking about. I don't know if Alex, if you counted the 290,000, how many of them, it was their first rally, but we're having people step into Jewish life and through a peoplehood lens, some for the first time. And how do we capture it? How do we keep them? How do we hold them in? It's an extraordinary opportunity in many respects. I don't know if do others in the Federation space want to offer a comment? Otherwise, we have a great presentation. We're going to pivot from Evan to talk about the hostage agenda. You want to also do anything or here at the table?
I just want to note that it's just incredible, Evan, to see the deep thought that goes into the wise spending of money. And I think it's a moment talking about Federation as the ultimate peoplehood organization. It really is a moment for Federation, because in many ways, the Jewish people is entrusting our pocketbook, right, to Federation and to other like organizations to carry out our will, our peoplehood will, which we've spoken loudly with our pocketbooks, and we need a trusted organization that's going to spend our money for us. And I think that that's actually a very peoplehood thing, to have an organization that is sort of gathering the collective wisdom and the collective input of the Jewish people to figure out how best to spend the funds that we've collected. So thank you very much for that.
If I could just,
Tova.
sorry, if
Yeah,
I could just
sure.
add one last thing on what you said. I appreciate both of your comments. I commend to you, there was an article in E-Jewish Philanthropy, I'm forgetting if it was yesterday or today, that talks about a study that my colleague, David Manchester at Jewish Federations North America has just completed a survey. And some of the items in the survey are just unbelievable. And one that leaps off is that 90%, just a tremendous, I don't have the percentages in front of me, a tremendous percentage of Jews are engaged. A tremendous percentage are giving. And 90% of people who have already given are planning on giving more. And I think that there is something about the federation system, which goes from the individual donor to the local federation and then a national and international system that really spells Jewish peoplehood. It is the individual donor's decision and desire to help the Jewish people. And it's the local federation that gives them the opportunity. And then together as a collective that is making sure that the funds are being spent in a way that that local donor can feel that that donor is making a real impact. So I feel very proud of that system in this moment.
Thank you, Evan.
Thank you again. Thanks to Roy Eisenberg. I saw he put that article that you referenced in the chat, and I think the author, Judah Ari Gross, is joining us today. So thank you. And maybe I'll just spotlight one thing you said is a great bridge to Tova, Evan. She's going to speak about the hostage and missing families, the response that you pointed to in terms of having to look for new outlets in Israeli civil society to address the needs that the old, the traditional, the legacy institutions couldn't meet these emergency needs, is something I think Tova's going to speak about, maybe in an exponentially greater way. Can we turn to you now? Thank you again,
Tova.
Evan. Tova Dorfman, who's joining us from Israel.
Hi. All right. Well, thank you very much for asking me to be here tonight. Just want to give you a little bit of a framework of where we're at currently. I think there's a ritual that we've adopted in the last, I think I would say, when was the first hostage release? All days seem to be a little bit blurry these days, but the first few days ago, when the first hostages were released on Friday, everybody gathers around the TV from about 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon when the names are starting to be released, and watch to see how this whole process unfolds. So that has been the last 4 or 5 days of our lives. And apparently we're going to have another few days because the ceasefire has been extended. I don't want to call it a ceasefire. Let's call it a pause in fighting for the next few days until there are more hostages released. And that's being negotiated right now. So needless to say, the hostage issue is, hold on, I'm just going to look at all of you because it's hard for me to talk without seeing people. The hostage issue is really the most crucial issue facing Israeli society today. I mean, we all talked about, Evan talked about all the needs, and they're all there, and everybody still continues to suffer from what happened on October 7th. But Israel is, as you know, Israeli society is very resilient. But the one big scar that is still there very deep beyond all the losses we had are really the hostage issue. And that is very ingrained, obviously, in Judaism with the whole notion of Pidyon Shvuim as a commandment. But we cannot move forward as a society until all the hostages are back home. So that really, I have to say, is Evan still here? Okay, so we can take it offline, but one comment that I just have, and I'm going to do a plug and then I'll leave it alone, is that the forum, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the work of the forum of hostage families, which really organized the day, I would say the day after, to provide a home for the hostage families, to provide advocacy, to do anything that we need to do in order to keep this thing on the front burner, to make sure that the world does not forget that we have hostages and that they need to be released, that this is a number one humanitarian issue. And I think that there hasn't been enough support, maybe because it's an organization that's kind of a really grassroots organization, but they are really struggling right now with trying to raise money for a lot of the delegations that are going. So I'm just doing a plug to JFNA with your allocations process, because it would really alleviate one big piece of the work that they have to do, which is really raise money, because we are now seeing, and I want to go back to what we experienced today. I think today is the first day that we're hearing eyewitness accounts of how these people were held, which is heartbreaking. That for a few days it was very, very quiet. They all look on the surface, everyone looks okay, with the exception of two people that came back on stretchers. One is in serious critical condition, an older woman, and the other one was shot in the leg and obviously had to be taken to the emergency room. She was, I think she's stable, but everyone else is seemingly okay when you look at them. But now we're beginning to hear the stories that are coming out where children 12 years old were isolated for 2 weeks at a time. Food was very sparse. They didn't shower for 53 days. They had to speak, had to whisper. So we're talking about not the kind of, I think that our world has changed even when they've come back now and have been slowly telling us what they've endured. So when we even had a slight fantasy that these barbaric people maybe had some kind of compassion for children when they were in their captivity, at least from a very practical standpoint, to keep them alive and keep them strong, that obviously did not happen. So we are very fearful for obviously the elderly who are still there. And there are still, I believe, 9 children left, including the B-bus families, which are the babies, those red-haired, gorgeous babies. And so this has really become the number one struggle. And I think that most of you have probably met in all of your various encounters, gatherings. I know at the big rally, there were several hostage families. But this really should be right now on the table, the number one thing. And we have learned, and I think I'll go into a little bit, I think Scott wanted me to talk a little bit about just one snippet of what we've been doing, which is I sort of fell into this, I don't really know how, but I did, fell into really escorting delegations and organizing trips for delegations of hostage families, because we realized how effective it is in communities, not only meeting with senators and public figures, but also to reach out beyond our echo chamber, to reach beyond the Jewish community, because it is so important. We're fighting, you all know that we're fighting a battle on social media. We're fighting, the anti-Semitism war. And it is so important for those people who are posting things on social media that it goes beyond the Jewish community. And so the first delegation that ventured out of the regular Washington, New York, I would say, Eastern Seaboard, was a delegation that we started with Z3, which is the conference Zionism 3.0 out of the JCCs in Palo Alto, where they had a big platform to speak to about 1,000 people. And then later on, they met with the community at large. And then we went down to LA. This was the first time they had West Coast, because everybody doubted why do we want to take them to the West Coast? Well, one of the reasons was we really wanted to wake up the entertainment community. And the Hollywood has been fairly silent, I would say, for the most part, on these issues and on what's happened since October 7th. So we wanted to really awaken some of the people that we thought could contribute. And for the most part, it was this very successful visit in the sense that I think we have a couple of pictures, but in the sense that we were able to get beyond what I mentioned, beyond the Jewish community. We really had very few Jewish community events. Most of the events were organized by either the heads of studios, the president of Warner Brothers showed up to one of the events, the head of Netflix,
No, but we can queue up with the photos if you'd like. Is that all
Sure.
right? You mentioned
yeah.
and some of the other venues.
Yeah. So, and then the top talent agencies that brought some of their clients. So if it's CAA, Creative Artists, I think this is not, okay, there we go. So that's Gal Gadot, who's been incredibly supportive. And she's showed up to almost every event that we had. It was really the last one in the room. And this is, if you see, this is one of the hostage families. His brother was taken hostage from the Nova Festival. He was with his brother, and at the time they were separated, and his brother is still in captivity. He's still a hostage. This is Gal. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, this is, we actually, at the same time, we were fortunate to have JFN West, Jewish Funders Network West conference. And so we were able to also connect with philanthropic foundations. And the panel you'll see here, and just this is Galia Mizrahi, who's over at, she's to my left. So I guess, I don't know how you're looking at it, but she's wearing the gray sweater. Her family was just released at the Goldstein Almog family. She's a cousin. And there were 3 children, and her cousin and the mother of the 3 children were released. The husband of the woman that was released with the 3 children was killed, along with their eldest daughter. The couple that you see in the middle.
Can I interject real quick?
Sure.
I feel compelled. I want to share with people. I was there at the meeting. Tova's pictured here speaking just after Rabbi Sharon Brous introduced the meeting with a very, very moving prayer. For the funders in that room, it's not the average public. These are deeply engaged people, philanthropists, and I saw people were absolutely at the edge of their seats. One leading philanthropist I saw walk up, just wanted to hug Eitan Gonen, Romi's father. I want you to keep talking, Tova, but I want people here, for those who haven't been, I know Laura has, she's brought family members around, but for those who haven't seen, the impact in the room in 3D, face-to-face, is way beyond what I expected.
Staggering. It's really staggering. To be in the presence of these families is something you never forget.
Right. So Eitan and Meital, Eitan's daughter Romi, also from the Nova Festival, is still a hostage, and we pray every day that she's on the list the next day. Itai was someone who was visiting Israel. He's on Special Forces unit, and talked about his encounter with the terrorists. You can flip the next. What is there another? Yeah. Okay, that's Gal that I mentioned before. Is there another? Okay, that's Eitan. You'll see they all wear their shirts. I don't know if you can see what I'm wearing right now. I don't know how many of you purchased this. This is the sort of a dog tag, which this is something you can order online, and the proceeds go to the hostage families. I think that it's rare to see someone in Israel not wearing one of these. Okay, and that's another thing that I think that I don't know if that's been going on in the American Jewish community, but if it hasn't, that's another thing that you may want to adopt. It's really important. You can go online, and I can provide the link to it. One of the things that we talked about, I mentioned this to Scott. It's interesting because you mentioned in your introduction about the blue ribbon. It's funny because in Israel we don't wear the blue ribbon; we wear a yellow ribbon. And if all of you are old enough to remember, tie a yellow ribbon, and whatever. So that, for some reason, Israelis have adopted that. And so you'll see cars with yellow ribbons on their cars. And that's what it stands for. If you remember in the days of Vietnam, right, where people had yellow ribbons tied around their trees or tied around in their front yards. So I think that that example is really an example of how we should be communicating better in the sense that really taking the lead from what's going on here. The hostage family organization, the forum, has been has done an amazing job at also branding that themselves in terms of bringing them home, which is the hashtag, which is the Instagram page that they use, and it's become sort of the symbol. One of the things that we try to do is also as many billboards as possible around. You saw that last week on Times Square, there was a billboard of Emily who just turned was 9th birthday. And she fortunately is back home. She's here. She came home on, I believe, on Saturday. And so many of the faces that we've come to know, or that you've come to know, because it's so important to know those faces, are people who've actually slowly in the last few days come home, especially the children. So what I want to say is that it's incredibly important in your communities, if you haven't, to sponsor and bring a delegation. It's not easy. It is not easy for them to get on a plane and come. It's not always the direct family member, because obviously if it's a mother or father, they don't want to leave because they're nervous about leaving the country. But we've been able to get enough because they feel that it's so important to keep this issue active, to keep this issue, this is one of our main issues today. As you know, that Israel is faced with a lot of criticism on a lot of different issues. This is the one issue that we can push that is a humanitarian issue. Beyond that, I just want to say something about the Red Cross, which is also you all can play a very important role. I know that this has been over and over and over again, the issue of the Red Cross and their visitation. It's obvious that there's so many violations of the humanitarian the way that these kids have been held, the way that these older people are being held, that there has to be really an outcry that the Red Cross has to be let in. And one more point, which is really disturbing for all of us who really prayed that it was just these Hezbollah and Hamas terrorists. But what's being told to us today is that the public, the Gazans themselves, were very complicit in some of the acts that happened to these hostages on their way to even where they were put. So Yocheved Lifshitz talks about she was stoned on the way that where they finally took her to, on the way that the public, the street, was throwing things at her. And so that there's just been this this complete feeling of how do we reconcile that? How do we reconcile with so much hate that goes on that is geared towards us? We have a lot of rebuilding to do, obviously. But I did want to bring to you the issue that this cannot be forgotten. It has to be on the front burner. It has to be supported. By the way, these hostage families talk about trauma. There is going to be some long-term trauma work that needs to be done, and they're going to need to be supported. Many of these hostage families obviously have stopped working. They don't do anything. But if any of you have been to Israel in the last few weeks and have been to the headquarters, Lori, hi, Lori, have you been? So if you go there, you end up, it's sort of a gathering place. People kind of come in and out. There's even a cafeteria to feed lunch and dinner for those people who just want to stay around. There's psychological services that are provided around the clock. And so it's an incredible, it's an incredible organization, and it's an incredible mobilization of Israeli society around this. I mean, the news is completely focused on this. And that's pretty much what most people talk about today. So I think, Scott, how am I doing on time?
We're going to collect a few questions and we're going to pivot right.
Yeah.
That's all right. There's
Yeah.
someone here, Vera Gutman, who I asked to take the privilege of the first comment. She's been organizing regular vigils at the Red Cross in Washington. And if we could kind of maybe combine a comment from Vera with a lightning round with others, Ruben Shimonov, and then we'll close and move to the next segment, if that's all right. Thank you, Tova. And it was I have to say, I'm sorry, it's a bit emotional. It's a privilege to join you for those few days in the Bay Area and Los Angeles. And for those who are joining us today, I'll just add to what Tova said. Not only are the trips impactful, but I saw that Tova in each place, and also me in Washington and others here who probably hosted, know it's a way to get people to do something rather than just worry, feel traumatized and watch the news. Each visit requires a lot of volunteers, everything from moving them around to hosting to logistics, as well as teeing up. Tova had an amazing network of volunteers, in addition to those who actually flew and escorted the hostage families. So it's incredibly impactful, and it's a way to engage people. But Vered, can you
I just want to say one thing. One
Sure.
second before, I'm sorry, Barry, but just one more thing that I did that I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but it's very important. So for those communities or people that want to, please feel free to reach out and say, you know, we want to put something together. I know Hanukkah is right around the corner next week, but we're taking another delegation next week, again, back to LA, because the LA community really, the entertainment community was so engaged that they wanted to do some more programs and more events, I should say. And so please feel free, because they're looking for people to organize as long as this is going on.
Barrett, go ahead.
Okay, hi, thank you, Scott, and thank you, Tova. This was very interesting. I thought I knew a lot about the forum, but I learned so much. I'm Israeli, as I assume most people could figure out by now, judging my accent. And I live in Washington, D.C., and I'm part of a group of organizers who started it's a group called Unacceptable. They are kind of the American equivalent of Brothers in Arms that Evan mentioned earlier. So the group actually started as a local American protest against the judicial coup, but since October 7th, they changed and are only doing activities to keep the issue of the hostages in the public eye. What we're doing in the DC chapter is we're organizing a weekly rally on Sundays at the American Red Cross, a rally to release the hostages. That's our one and only demand. We're trying to keep it not political, and we're basically just trying to help the forum of the hostages and the families, and just to be there in their support. I was just on the phone with Emily Muati from the forum. So just support them, getting from them, the message comes from them. If they believe that the Red Cross should be praised or criticized, that's basically what we do. So we dealt with a few issues, and that's one of the reasons I was just on the phone with Emily from the forum. Besides for keeping the hostages in the public eye, which is so important, we thank Biden every week. We thank the American government. How do we deal with the Red Cross? Tova, you mentioned it. You're being critical of them. We were not sure if we should criticize them or just ignore. Like their job is nothing like. There are not many things that they can do independently, if I understand correctly, besides for saying that the Hamas should enable them to visit and maybe openly criticizing Hamas, that they did not do. maybe there's not much more that they can do. So this is one issue we're dealing with. Should we thank Qatar, or should we say something that's kind of pushing them to do more? Those are issues we were dealing with. But so far, I think, I mean, I hope we're managing to at least to keep it in the public eye. We have about 200 people coming to the rally. And again, the rally is a weekly thing. So, and unfortunately, I think we will have to be there for the long run. We had Representative Jamie Raskin speak a few weeks ago. We have a few Democrats who are running for Congress, Dan Helmer last week, and Eugene Villman is going to speak this week. Rabbis from around the DC area, of course, Chazanim who are singing with us. Yeah, so that's it. That's what we do.
Thank you very
Great.
much.
Thank you.
Great.
Ruben, did you?
Kol hakavod.
Yeah.
Tova, I just wanted to say about the dog tags. On the website of the forum, it does not allow to send to the US.
I just posted in the chat a link that says US. Bring them home now.
It does say US, but when you actually do it, it does not let you. It says that.
Let
it
me,
is not
you know
done.
what? I'm glad you're telling me this. Let me check it tomorrow, and then I can send you something. That's
Perfect. I heard
okay.
it from other friends too, but I tried.
Really okay. Why the link doesn't work? Like if you want to send
It
it,
does. It lets you choose the American address, and on the next step it says we do not send.
Tova's
to
got her homework. Maybe I'll
No,
sneak in one
that's
quick
great that
comment.
you're telling me that
Or if
because
I-
I'm meeting with Emily, meeting with them tomorrow. So I'm glad you told me
Perfect.
that.
Tova, I want to just sneak in one quick comment, and maybe we'll end this portion in just a minute. But what I've seen also from where I sit in Washington, because the empty Shabbat table displays, which have been patterned off what was done in Tel Aviv initially on that first Friday night, I've watched. I think many of us have in many cities how incredible moving these are, but they're done grassroots by volunteers. And I sense, I'm telling you, in a meeting largely of professionals, I sense that the brick and mortar and the bigger institutions are either going to have to absorb that or offer help. I worry that these big displays that are dependent on people's volunteer time, these grassroots efforts might start to peter out as we get from 4, 6, and 7 weeks to a longer term. So it's something I think, if you don't mind the nudge to people around the table, and I've privately asked some institutions maybe to take some of that on, because it's not easy to do.
So
I
actually,
mean, hopefully,
sorry.
no,
If
I'm
I
saying
can
hopefully
also
these
ask-
things will go away. Hopefully we will end this crisis
There's
sooner
nothing.
than later. But if we don't, then we have to go into, free Soviet Jewry mode where it becomes part of our institutions that we have people who are dedicated to dealing with this issue and keeping it alive.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We
Okay.
just a small plug then. I mean, we really work with almost no budget, but we do have a few expenses every week. So if anyone can help, it's only, just renting audio equipment and things like that. It's almost nothing, but any help can help. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Vered. Thank you, Tova. I'm going to turn now to Todd, our last speaker, who's going to talk about the JCC world. So Todd.
Wow. So following that, I feel like we need to take a breath and recognize that we are sitting here with our hearts in Israel, and for many of us, our feet are still here in the West. And to create vibrant Jewish community that is connected deeply to Israel is so very, very important. So what I want to say, first of all, is it's an honor to be here and a pleasure to have been offered this opportunity from my dear friend and colleague, Doron Krakow, who many of you know is actually in Israel right now with his family while doing this vitally important work on behalf of our movement. We often talk about our movement as the town square of the Jewish community, a place that on a weekly basis overall sees about 1 million Jews of every stripe and kind, and about 500,000 of our visitors on top of that are from the broader community. So we are in many ways also the embassy to the broader community, in a place where we can create, hopefully, understanding, empathy, and awareness as to the issues that are affecting us here today. The JCC movement is, I have said for many, many years that JCCs are to their local community what Israel is to the world Jewish community, which is a place for all Jews. And we take very seriously the responsibility of creating that open tent, providing opportunities for gathering and conversation. And what I'll say from my own experience is that when October 7th happened, it was one of, I'm sure like for many of us, or if not all of us, one of the most devastating days of our lives. I know for me, I woke up, I went to bed that evening with an Israeli book, a book on Israeli prime ministers that I was looking forward to reading the next day. That was going to be my Simchat Torah activity. And I woke up and everything had very quickly changed, and recognized that the first thing we needed to do was begin to figure out how we were going to bring our community together very quickly. And in partnership with our local Jewish Federation, known as Jewish Philanthropies of Southern Arizona, we run the Weintraub Israel Center. And within a day, we had planned a gathering where almost 1,000 people showed up and sat in our sculpture garden and had a meaningful program. What it meant for us was we leaned into things we were already doing. The JCC is a peoplehood experiment that I think is highly successful. And we had a number of programs already on the calendar that we were able to expand from. And I'm going to talk very quickly about 3 of them. The weekend after, on October 15th, we were bringing in Amanda Berman from Zioness. And while the agenda for the program evolved into something different, we already had people ready to engage about what is it to hold a Zionist identity, and how could we be the conduit for our community to think about that differently than we had before. On October 20th, we had a community Shabbat dinner. And what we had anticipated was about 200 people coming together with 7 congregations doing services in 7 different spaces here at the J, and then a communal dinner. As a result of a need for togetherness and community, that 200 people became 350 people. It was a remarkable expression of what a J can be in a community, which is a place to bring people together. Synagogues, Federation, day school, all here, honoring a moment of peoplehood in a way that we had not envisioned when we first planned this very meaningful program. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago, we had brought in Sarah Aresti, who is a Ladino singer and musician and educator. And we had a chance as a scholar in residence to talk about Jewish life elsewhere, not North America, not Israel, but what the evolution of Ladino culture is and why it needs to be and should be part of our ethos today, because we are inextricably connected to our past and to our future, and that we have been able to be abundantly clear in our work here at the J about our position on Israel. I will pause to say that on October 9th, we are blessed, I will say, to have 5 staff who are Muslim, who have come here as refugees to our country, who work proudly at the JCC. Many of them wear a hijab, and I was pleased to see that they came to work the next day and came to me and wanted to, I'll say, virtually embrace their relationship here at the JCC and what the JCC and the Jewish community has meant to their acculturation into our community here. That was incredibly meaningful for them and for the Jewish community. What I want to pivot to is the importance of gathering. That while we have heard for many years about institutional allergies, about people wanting to decentralize Judaism, and to not engage with legacy institutions in the way that they've had, that has not been our experience in the JCC movement. We need to think differently about how we go out and find people and how we engage people and meet them where they are, but they are not afraid or allergic to become part of institutional life. What I'd like to do now, if we can, we're going to do a little bit of an interaction. I want to share our generative mission statement around how we work at the Tucson J with Israel. So if we can pull that generative mission statement up on the screen. So the idea behind our work with Israel is that our goal in embedding the Weintraub Israel Center in our Jewish Life and Engagement Department is that we are trying to advance a Zionist identity in Israel as part of our community's Jewish identity, and not something separate from Jewish identity, which I think for too long the Israel departments have been separate from Jewish life and learning, and we have embedded it in. And our goal is to create an idea of journeys. So I'm going to invite you to look at this generative mission statement, and what you'll see is two thought bubbles. This is like an old-fashioned Mad Lib for those of us that remember them from years ago. And we invite people to either choose one of the words that we have pre-selected or include their own. So I'm going to give you a moment to do this exercise on your own, and then we'll talk for a moment. So if anybody would like to unmute themselves and share what they have considered for a self-propelled journey of individuals to create and nurture what kind of relationship with Israel and Israelis, enabled by opportunities offered by local Jewish community as well as other sources that will inspire you to do what? Because what we're trying to do is to bring people into action around our relationship collectively and individually with Israel. Anyone in the mood to share?
Yeah, Alex, come on. I'm picking wrestle on the last one. I think wrestle's a great metaphor. You want people to
The hug
wrestle and
wrestle,
struggle.
I liked the hug wrestle also. Shocking, Scott, that we like.
All right.
Nurture.
For the first one, sustainable speaks to me because we're in it for the long run. And
Yeah,
it's about the next century, the next 100 years, the next and how we build long-lasting relationships that don't just address particular moments, but transcend crises and particular episodes in the present. And I mean, it's just the same way I think about a sustainable romantic relationship or friendship. It's about looking at it what is it, longitudinally, right?
Mhm. So you all now have this in the Google Drive, and feel free to play with it. It brings Wonderful discussion. What I have found after the last 2 years of having this mission statement is it's like the Torah. We read it over and over and over again, and we interpret it differently based on where we are and where our heads are at or hearts are at that moment. And the same thing, I have selected many different words at many different times. We can stop the screen share and hopefully we'll be able to share the next document in a moment. As we think about our work at the JCC, what we've built our work on is the statement of principles for the Jewish Community Center movement that were established about 10 years ago now. We have built our strategic plan for the Tucson J using those principles as a foundation. We have gone from there to create our own definition of wellness, which we think is beyond what typically you think of in terms of wellness as diet and exercise. We really believe that wellness has 15 different aspects, and I'll share with you hopefully in a moment what that looks like. And from there, we have written a Talmud, a daf of Talmud, that we use as a representation of our work. So if we can share that document and hopefully start on the 4th screen, and we'll work our way up.
Todd, we don't have it queued up. Can I maybe make a game day call? Can we share it with people after?
I certainly can.
Yeah.
Scott, I shared it with you, so you can share that out.
Unless you want to pull it up on your computer, I'm not able to do it from where I'm sitting.
If you give me 1 second, I will open that up and then we can look at it together. I apologize for not having that all together.
Take a minute to queue it up. Maybe others, while we'll give you 60 seconds, can comment if they want. I mean, I've seen surges of in-person participation, not just at JCCs. It's remarkable at synagogues and in other brick and mortar spaces. It's astounding, and it doesn't seem to be letting up.
I think that that's very accurate. We are experiencing almost everything we do. There is an incredible surge of participation and desire for participation. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So the JCC Association Statement of Principles is based on these 6 items that are in fact the purpose to strengthen Jewish life and build a greater Jewish community. And the 5th one is that Israel is the eternal birthright of the Jewish people, linking us to our past and to Jews around the world today. And that guides a great deal of our thinking in terms of the way in which we don't just think locally, we think globally in terms of creating Jewish connections. Also, creating a Jewish identity is a unique and individual lifelong process, which was a piece that guided us in creating the journeys that you just looked at. So I'll let you all look at this for a second as I scroll up as if these are building blocks. To the strategic plan for RJ, which is, based on these 5 pillars. And a key aspect of creating our strategic plan was leaning into the idea that everybody belongs and some people join. Therefore, we are not a membership organization. We are an organization that happens to have membership, but our primary driver is engaging with everyone in a way that is meaningful and impactful to them. And a paywall does not exist for you to participate in the J's activities. So you'll see that an aspect of our wellness wheel is peoplehood, and therefore creating opportunities, which you can see right here, creating opportunities for people to engage together, both with the Jewish community locally, but also with the Jewish community globally, is essential for Jewish communal wellness. And that is why these 15 aspects represent what we think about when we talk about how to help ourselves and our community to be well. And I'm rushing through this, so we have a minute if you all have any questions. But out of this is, in fact, our Talmud. So I'm going to shrink this just a tad so it fits on the screen for you.
Like a Daf Talmud.
Yeah.
So we have written our own Talmud. And we did this by interviewing staff and board members so that everyone has a chance to see themselves in the Daf. And we have left, like any good piece of Talmud, a chance for more to be written.
But first of all, it's beautiful, Todd. If I could interject, you set off a cavalcade here in this room when you mentioned Sarah Aroeste, because she's got a huge fan club at this table, and now you've set off another round of big smiles and admiration for this teaching tool, this piece of pedagogy and peoplehood. Kol hakavod.
Toda. So what I'll say is that underneath all the strategy and philosophy is a need for people to come together. 900 people at a gathering, 350 people at a community Shabbat dinner, hundreds of people at the other programs that I described between then and now. And I think that the overarching theme that I'll say is we should not be afraid to try to gather people together. We recognize the impact of people standing shoulder to shoulder and not just on Zoom, and people are not afraid to do that. We create a safe and secure environment for people in a variety of ways. One is absolutely physical and so on security, but also the psychological safety of knowing that when you come together without judgment and with deep support. I do want to end by saying that we, number one, Tova, I appreciate having seen you at Z3 and been deeply impacted by the stories that I and the delegation that we brought of about 11 people valued. And we are pointed north to 2025 when we expect to host the JCC Maccabi Games. And we'll welcome 1,000 people from across North America and around the world to Tucson. These are things we shouldn't walk away from. These are the things that we need to be doing to look forward. And what I've said over and over again before I take questions in our community is we can have anger, we can have fear, and we can have sadness. But if we don't balance that stool with hope and resilience, we will crumble under the other emotions. So we need to hold all of that together and create space for people to hold the emotions of sadness or anger or fear, but also to feel like there is a future ahead of us for a Jewish community and Jewish life. Because if we don't, people will run away and bury themselves, and that is not the Jewish future that we aspire to create for our community and for Jews around the world.
Thank you so much, Todd. Thank you so much. Anyone want to give some quick comments? I want to be respectful of everybody's time and make sure we end on time. Ruben, go ahead.
Okay, I'll try to be very
Can everyone hear Ruben online? We might want to move the microphone.
I'll try to be
Yes.
brief or concise, but just a couple of things that are I'm processing right now. Todd, I really appreciated what you said about number one, the importance of balancing the heaviness of this moment with resilience and with, I'm going to use another word, with Jewish joy, which I think is an essential part of our an essential value of the Jewish people. It's something that we speak a lot about at the American Sephardi Federation, and had me just thinking about this Shabbaton that we recently hosted for our, we have a student leadership fellowship called the Sephardi House Fellowship for 30 Sephardic students from around the country, college students. And we were thinking about, is it the right time to have this summit? And it was proven to us that it was exactly the right time to come together in person, physically, to break bread together, to be in community, to process the challenging moment at hand, and to come with ruach, with spirit, and with simcha, with joy. So I just wanted to thank you for how your words resonate with our values as well. A quick question that I had, and if it's okay, I was saving it from all these. So it's I think a bit more related to what Tova was saying, but maybe anybody can speak to this. Tova, you were mentioning certain strategies, or even how do we say, like, yes, like strategic things that we can do collectively that are visual. And so one thing you mentioned was, I'm thinking right now about some of the disparities. So, the yellow ribbon in Israel, the blue one here. And this might be a granular question, but one thing I've been wondering, and actually students have been asking me, is, for example, with the Bring Them Home Now initiative. So, and I spent a lot of time on Instagram because my students are now on there. There is Bring Them Home, there's Bring Them Home Now, there is hashtag kidnap from Israel, and often I just end up using all of them. But I'm wondering, first of all, for just clarity, which is here at ASF, we've been working a lot with the 2 Israeli artists here who have been doing the Bring Them Home movement with the posters, many of which have been being torn down every day. But then I learned about Bring Them Home Now, which is different, but again, same mission. This question might be granular, but is there value in trying to work really hard to streamline things? And while we have this same, we have a similar mission, but are we still not communicating it in unison? This is one question, and I know it's 2. So the other one, and this is really hard for me to ask because it's something I'm sitting with a lot of emotion right now, is while I have seen unprecedented achdut and unity in our community, I'll be quick. I cannot be blind to the fact that there is this, albeit small, minority in the Jewish collective that is hurting many of us, or really, just making us feel a lot of hurtful emotions because of the way that they are right now engaging with this matter. And I know it brings up a bigger question of who is in and who is out in our conversations of Jewish peoplehood. And for a long time, I think we were able to just put that question to the side. I see more and more, even though still we know statistics and surveys always show that the majority of American Jews and global world Jews are Zionists, and there's a diversity within that. But I don't think we can escape from this question now of those in our midst who are challenging us a lot and are a source of pain. I'll speak subjectively for me, but who are part of the Jewish people. How do we engage this question? How do we get? I'm not saying let's hold hands with JVP, but what I am saying is more than ever before, there are people in my midst, including folks who I have considered friends and acquaintances, who stand in a very different place in the Jewish world. And I'm having a hard time grappling with how to engage them. And so I'm just very vulnerably asking this or bringing this to the forefront.
Thank you for that very, very, very important question, Ruben. Really important. In fact, I'd like to suggest that we do a future masterclass on, insiderhood and outsiderhood. And I think that this deserves much more than a 1-minute response. It actually deserves an hour and a half of, at least, of deep pondering. So I'm going to hold it for now, although I will tell you that I've been thinking about that question a ton recently, and it's very, very, very important question. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and I want to wrap us up. So I'm just going to share a statistic with you. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I've been citing this statistic over and over again, and I think it encapsulates exactly what we've been talking about today. ADL and Hillel recently did a study. There's Jewish unity when AJC is quoting ADL. We're best friends now. So ADL and Hillel did a study together that showed that students on campus who were involved with Hillel were far less likely to feel anti-Semitism on campus than students who are not involved with Hillel. That is completely counterintuitive, because the students who are involved with Hillel are the ones typically who are visibly Jewish, who are wearing a kippah or a Magen David around their neck, or skirts for girls, or whatever it is. They are the visibly Jewish kids. And yet, despite that fact, they're feeling it less. What is it? So I like to argue that what it is they are cushioned from the cruelty of the anti-Semitic world around them because of the Jewish community that they've enveloped themselves in. And I want to mention that because I feel like at this moment, the great outpouring of Jews to the Jewish community is about a sense of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Lazeh, all Israel is responsible for one another. But it's not only that. I think that for so many Jews, this is a way of obtaining relief, of obtaining succor in a moment of such pain. And it's a way of protecting ourselves from what we see going on around us. And I want to leave us with the question, because of that, leave us with the question of what happens when things calm down? What happens when, please God, the hostages are free and there's a more or less permanent, quote unquote, ceasefire put into place? Maybe, God willing, Hamas is no longer in control of Gaza. God willing, anti-Semitism somehow lowers in the United States. What do we do to create the kind of community that Jews will still want to seek out, even when they don't need the sense of protection, the sense of relief, but that they want the sense of uplift, the sense of resilience, the sense of enrichment? And we heard about that from all three speakers in different ways today. Because even when you talk about hostages, there is an uplift that comes from helping the hostages, even as we suffer along with them and struggle so deeply side by side with those families. So I'm leaving us with that charge to think about, God willing, a moment when the agony of this moment will begin to subside, some of the issues will resolve, the hostages will be free. And what are we going to do to maintain that Jewish community? So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much to our amazing presenters. And I'm looking forward to our next masterclass. You've given us an idea, everyone.
Yes.